This is Between Classes, a Qurtuba Islamic Academy production. Coming up in this episode.
And I went abroad when I was 12 years and I became a Haafidh in Karachi, and then I completed my Alim Fadil course in Devangree town in Karachi. How many of you students have actually read a complete book on Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And by and large, the response is, no, we haven't read. I can't understand the argument of those who say that by you voting and taking part in the electoral process, you are supporting an un-Islamic system. By you staying in the country, you are supporting an Islamic system.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to yet another episode of Between Classes by Qurtuba Islamic Academy. My name is Salmaan Devangree from grade 12, and seated next to me is Haafidh Muhammad Akoojee from grade 11.
On today's episode, we are joined by a beacon of pride and a prominent figure within South Africa's Muslim community, none other than Moulana Ebrahim Bham. Moulana completed his formal Islamic studies under leading scholars at Jamia Loom Islamia in Devangree town in Pakistan, immersing himself in the rich tradition of Islamic scholarship.
Throughout Moulana's career, Moulana Bham has served the Muslim community in various capacities, embodying a commitment to leadership and service. He has notably held the position of Imam at Hamidiyya Masjid in Newtown, Johannesburg, where his sermons and guidance have inspired congregants for years.
Additionally, Moulana played a pivotal role in the establishment of educational institutions, notably as a founding member of the Johannesburg Muslim School. Moulana Bham also serves as the Secretary General of the Jamiatul Ulama South Africa and is an executive member of the United Ulama Council of South Africa.
Today we will be discussing the importance of voting and its relationship with Islam. Could Moulana provide us with a snapshot into your educational journey and upbringing?
First, Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum to you and to all the listeners. Jazakallah for the opportunity. It is an honor. And I hope that inshallah our interaction will be one that will be interactive, will be informal, and inshallah will be beneficial. Firstly, I come from a very small town in Limpopo, now known as Bella Bella, previously known as Wombat. My educational journey started off at a very young age. My marhum uncle, Moulana Muhammad Bhamji, was attached to the founder of Jamiatul Ulum al-Islamia, which you made mention, was a place where I studied. And he took me for studies when I was 12 years of age. So I studied and I went abroad when I was 12 years and I became a Hafiz in Karachi, and then I completed my Alim Fadil course in Devangree town in Karachi. So that was a background. Started off studying in Wombats in the primary school there. Started off Hifz but couldn't complete there, and then completed my Hifz and my Alim course in Devangree town in Karachi.
It's evident from Moulana's depth of knowledge that you are well read. How important, in your view, is the habit of reading?
Reading is one of the means of knowledge, and it has always been, not only in contemporary times, but even in our traditional scholars have always spoken about the aspect of reading. So the first wahi that came down from Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we know that the greatest time between the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam was between Hazrat Isa alayhi salam and Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The ulama say that it was close to 600 years between the two, and thereafter the first message that came from Almighty Allah was about knowledge and reading. Iqra, read. Although we don't complete the verse, it also says read in the name of Almighty Allah. Our reading should have a purpose. It should bring us closer towards Almighty Allah. I've been fortunate that I've always had an interest in reading. When I today speak to scholars or I speak to students, I do teach in the Jamia of the Jamiat. And when I do speak to the first year students, I ask them, well, I'm teaching you Seerah. How many of you students have actually read a complete book on Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And by and large, the response is, no, we haven't read. I haven't found a student who came to study Deen, who came to study an Alim course. And that is quite surprising, but then I suppose that is the environment we are living in. That it said that I have read a complete book or a biography of Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam from cover to cover. There are very few who did it. Yet when I went to study at the age of 12, by that time there weren't many books. there used to be a series of books known as Heroes of Islam. It used a pen sketch of 15 great heroes of Islam, starting with Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Khulafa Rashidin. And I completed that before the age of 12. And when I went abroad, my father, because he was worried that I didn't complete, contemporary knowledge, so he subscribed to the Reader's Digest, which was a very popular digest at that time, which was very good in English, especially the vocabulary, etc. And I used to get it every month and used to read. From that time, I've always been a person who loves reading. Even today, when next to my bedside, there's about at least 7 to 8 books. And one of the frustrating parts is that before you complete one book, then you start another book, and you never get to finish a book. But it has always been part and parcel of my routine to read books. Alhamdulillah, that has been the grace of the Almighty.
Moulana, so in terms of English books, out of all the books that Moulana has read, is there a book that really left a mark on you?
Well, it's difficult to say one specific book. Rather, I would go by authors. I've always been very impressed by the works and the writings of Mufti Taqi Usmani. And I found his writings to be very balanced, full of knowledge, full of beautiful anecdotes. So he had the right balance between academia and general interest. He had the right balance between the two extremes. He was neither, very extreme, neither did he fall short of the limit. His writings had a fluency. And previously, whenever I find an article written by Mufti Taqi Usmani, I immediately take it and I read it. They will always be part and parcel of my reading, literature would be books by Mufti Taqi Usmani. Previously, it used to be only in Urdu, but many of his books have been very well translated into the English language recently. So he wrote a book on politics, Islam and politics, which was in Urdu, but has recently been translated into English. He wrote a book with regard to who are the ulama of Deoban, also translated into English. There was a book launch of it previously. So out of all the authors that I found his books to be something that I had a natural inclination to. When I came back and after studying, there used to be a magazine called Impact Magazine. So in the Impact Magazine, there used to be a series. The first article in that magazine used to be First Things First. It used to be written by Khalid Beg. And why I liked it was it took very important subjects, but it condensed it and it was very comprehensive. So it was a page, but it took every particular type of topic. He took it and it wrote only about a page, but he covered that topic quite well. And then after many years, I wrote to him and I said that we should put that particular articles of yours into a book form. And I was instrumental in having that particular book printed and published in South Africa. And at a time when nowadays you get people, publishing 250, 500 books, we printed 10,000 of those books and all 10,000 of it was distributed and sold. So yes, I've always found that to be one book that also made an impact upon me was Aidil Qarni's book, Don't Be Sad. And the reason why it had an impact upon me was that we do find that we tend to look much to our jurisprudence. So when we read about books, we read about fiqh, halal, haram. But this book, why it made a big difference to me was it was solution orientated. It spoke about motivation. So there wasn't so much about halal and haram, but it motivated people. And today I find that there is a lack of motivation and there is a need for us to be motivated. So I did enjoy that book. And of course, out of all the books that one has read, any book that is pertaining to the seerah of our beloved Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is always something that I've always found to be interesting and I'm inclined towards it.
Nana, with regards to the upcoming elections, there's a lot of debate among Muslims about whether we should be voting or not. From an Islamic lens, how should we view voting in a non-Muslim-led country?
Yes, it's correct what you have said, that there are differences of opinion amongst the ulama. And my understanding that even if there is difference of opinion, there is a great amount and a body of ulama who have permitted voting even in non-Muslim societies and communities. The first thing that we start off is that the ideal. The ideal is that we implement Islamic law in every aspect of our life, whether it be social, whether it be economics, whether it be politics, and even in governance. Islam has got a framework with regard to governance, how a state must be governed. Right. However, while we believe that to be the ideal, it would be, in my opinion, naive that until the ideal is not reached, you sit inactive. So that means what do? That until you don't get the ideal, you don't do anything. You don't strive to have better governance. You don't strive to have better rulers over you. You don't strive to make the community you are living in a better place. I can't understand those who have taken that view that we only work for the ideal. So if you're only going to work for the ideal, then what happens in the interim? So it means in the interim you do nothing. You put up your hands in the air and say, well, until we don't reach the ideal, we don't do nothing. I think that is a foolish and it is a short-sighted way of looking at things. Even if you look at the seerah of our beloved Nabi Karim Sallallahu, while he worked towards the ideal of a Medinan society, which was a society of justice, but it didn't just happen like that. It was a process. And during that process, there were times when our beloved Nabi Karim Sallallahu worked within the system. And from that particular system, he walked towards an ideal. So I'll just give an example, and I can quote many other examples. When Nabi Karim Sallallahu went to Taif, he came back from Taif. And now when you had to come back from Taif, at that particular time, the system of the people of Makkah was, when you come back, you take the protection of someone, especially people who were hostile to our beloved Nabi Sallallahu. So Nabi Karim Sallallahu, before he came into Makkah, he sought the protection of various very influential people in Makkah. And many of them were afraid or didn't want to give Nabi Sallallahu protection. And one person by the name of Jubair bin Mut'im, or not Jubair bin Mut'im, his father, Mut'im bin Adi, gave Nabi Karim Sallallahu protection. He brought Nabi Karim Sallallahu into Makkah, took his sons, took Nabi Karim Sallallahu in the Kaaba and Baytullah and told the people that I have given protection to Muhammad. No one can harm him because he's under my protection. So what I'm saying is that Nabi Karim Sallallahu worked within that system. And according to that system, that was the norm at that time, to take the protection of someone. So I'm saying in a similar manner, we are not in the ideal. We can work towards an ideal, but in the meanwhile, you can't sit and wait for the ideal and do nothing. We work towards making the place that you and I are living in a better place for everyone, not only for Muslims and non-Muslims.
Jazakallah Moulana for that beautiful explanation. I think it's very much applicable in the situation, and I think could help a lot of people decide on which side of the fence they are.
With the upcoming elections, as we know, there is a lot of debate among Muslims whether or not they should be voting. They argue that voting goes against Islamic principles because democracy is not an Islamic concept. How do we navigate this argument?
Well, the first point I would say, as I said, made mention with regard to it, that you can't wait for an ideal and do nothing. So, I mean, that is perhaps short-sighted. And then even with regard to the democracy, we fully understand that. We believe that Islam is the ideal in everything that we do, whether it be economics, whether it be finance, whether it be... But that doesn't prevent people from doing business. I mean, those who say that you're not supposed to live, or because democracy is not an ideal, we're not supposed to take part in politics or in terms of governance, why doesn't it prevent you from doing business? You can go and say that the business model that is out there that we are living in and we are doing business is not an Islamic concept, is not interest-free, that's why we must not do business. I mean, that doesn't make sense. But yet the people who are providing that as an alternative, they make mention of it as it is the ideal. How can it be the ideal? You don't have a business situation where it's a Quran according to Islam, but yet you are partaking in business, right? You are making money, you're making wealth. Similar situation, we don't say democracy is an ideal. I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made mention with regard to the governance, but while you work towards an ideal, and I don't know what people are doing to work towards an ideal. You are staying in South Africa, which has got 2 or 3% of Muslims. There are countries which has got 99% Muslims. They have not been able to achieve that ideal. So are you going to sit here with 2 or 3% saying that we're going to reach an ideal? Until we don't reach ideal, we're not going to do anything. So that is not correct. And then I'll just give you a few examples with regard to it. We don't say it's an ideal, but you work within the systems to find the best way of you living and have a space within that system to be able to follow your deen to the best of your ability. So if we look at great ulama, because ulama are the ones who understand deen. So the ulama of India, we are very similar to our type of situation. They have given the views and the permissibility of giving votes. As recent as December of last year, which is a few months away, the ulama of India took a joint statement, and it was a joint statement of ulama across the board, of prominent ulama whom you and I respect, the people of South Africa respect, who called upon the Muslims to register in the votes and partake in the votes. One of our great Darul Ulooms in India, the Darul Uloom Dabil, right, which many of our ulama graduate from, gave the students off on the day of elections to go and vote. Right? Mufti Taqi Usmani, whom I said is one of the great scholars, he made mention with regard to voting. Not only did he say it's permissible, but he motivated towards it by saying that one of the drawbacks of today's society is we have reduced Islam only to devotional matters like salat, zakat, etc. And when it comes to governance, we take the view that no, this is outside the pale of Islam. He says, and where did we get that particular type of understanding? No, he says it is part and parcel of Islamic ethics and teachings to have a say in governance. So we need to be making our mark in that particular regard. And he said that we take this view that it's got nothing to do with deen, but he says no, it has got part to do with deen. And he goes on to make mention, it's a whole long article which he has written, and then he says that giving your vote is a form of testimony. And sometimes Allah in the Holy Quran says, وَلَا تَكْتُمُ الشَّهَادَةِ, don't conceal evidence and testimony. So if you don't vote, it is like akin to you concealing evidence and testimony. So there's a whole corpus of ulama who have given permissibility. Those who say that by you voting, you are supporting an un-Islamic system. Then the question, if you take it further, is you are living in an un-Islamic country and you are part and parcel of this country. You pay tax to the government uses that tax money of yours, which you are paying your money, to implement a system which you say is un-Islamic. Then what are you doing in this country? By that particular argument, you're not supposed to be in this country. So I can't understand the argument of those who say that by you voting and taking part in the electoral process, you are supporting an un-Islamic system. By you staying in the country, you are supporting an Islamic system. So what you do is you find the best way within that particular system to be able to find an aspect of governance that will be good for the country and good for not only for the country, but for the people of the country.
Alhamdulillah, I don't think so. Maybe a lot of our listeners may not have known some of the things you have mentioned.
So Moulana, now that we have established voting's significance, many are unsure who to support. What qualities should Muslims prioritize when assessing political leaders, manifestos or debating points?
A very important point. They say normally religious leaders must be a little bit careful of making a political call in favor of a politician or in favor of a political party. But I think the point is that the one point that we must realize is Islam has given great amount of importance to the community. And there are many issues that in the community are not religious based. They are community based. Like for example, crime. Right? Crime is something that hits across all societies and spectrum of the community. Whether you're Muslim, non-Muslim, whether you're Indian, black, colored, or whatever your background is, whatever your ethnic background, whatever your race, crime is not a religious problem. It's a societal problem. And you have to deal with it as a community. You have to deal with it as a community. You can't be staying on a street, right? And then if there is an initiative to reduce crime and you say, no, there is non-Muslims in this particular initiative, I'm not going to be part of it. That's not Islam. Mufti Mahmud Sahib Rahmatullah Alayhi, the very famous Grand Mufti of India, made mention with regard to it. And he gave an example. He said if there is, that time in India, in the villages used to have sometimes snakes that comes into the village. He says if your neighbor calls you that there is a snake in the street, in the small alleyway, let us get together to remove that harmful snake. He said by you cooperating with him, what's wrong with it? It's not against Islam. You are cooperating for something that is useful to you and the other person. So sometimes you have to look at our beloved Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his activism towards a better community. Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, you are not a believer if you eat your fill and your neighbor is hungry. He didn't say whether your neighbor is a Muslim or non-Muslim. What does it tell you? Your responsibility to the community, your responsibility towards the neighborhood. Right? Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, he emphasized the emphasis upon neighbors to such an extent. Sahaba said, Ma zala Jibreel yusini bil jar hatta zanantu annahu sayuwarithu. He emphasized the rights towards the neighborhood so much so that we thought that very soon he is going to make neighbors part of your estate, what you leave behind when you die. I sometimes think that we have enough problems within the family with regard to estate. Can you imagine if the neighbors were part of the estate? But what I'm trying to say is that that's how Islam looked upon our responsibility towards the neighborhood. Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Sometimes there are neighbors who have 3 rights over you. He's a family member, he is a Muslim, and he's right next to you. Sometimes there is someone who has 2 rights over you. Sometimes there is a neighbor who has 1 right over you. That there is a neighbor in the neighborhood, there is a person who is not a Muslim. He still has a right over you. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As radiallahu ta'ala one day was slaughtering a sheep. And he told the people, the first thing that you do after you slaughter the sheep is to see to it that a portion of the meat goes to the non-Muslim neighbor. So we have a responsibility to the neighborhood. It's not part of deen to sit and say, I'm only going to sit in my khanqa and not have a worry about the community. Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wasallam, on one occasion there was a noise in Medina Munawwara, right? And people were apprehensive. What is this noise? Did someone come and attack Medina Munawwara? Is there something to be apprehensive about? So they came out of their house with great amount of trepidation and with apprehensiveness. And subhanAllah, I always make mention of this. Can you imagine the sight? Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wasallam on his horseback, and he's coming to tell the people of Medina that don't worry, I went to go and see the source of the noise. There is no apprehension. There is nothing to worry about. Now, the community police forums play that role. They come and tell the community, no, there is nothing wrong, or they're looking at the security. That is the mizaj and the temperament of our Sharia. So just to say that, no, we're going to sit behind and we're going to wait for the ideal, and sometimes the ideal is say, no, Imam Mahdi come, then the time of ideal come. You can't sit till that particular time. Then you are, it's foolish, it's naive, it's short-sightedness. So the temperament of Islam is to be part and parcel of the community. Nabi Karim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam even went to this extent when he said, Al-Muslimu alladhi yukhalitu an-nas wa yazbiru ala adahum. A Muslim who interacts with people. Now when you interact with people, you are going to have to face inconvenience. So, you always say, you hear people say, I only go to the masjid, I don't do anything, I don't speak to anyone, I just go masjid, I come back home. Because I don't want to get involved in the politics, I don't want to get involved in the community affairs. We take it as it is a virtue. It's not a virtue. The Muslim who interacts and he bears patiently the inconvenience of interacting, he's better than a Muslim who doesn't interact and doesn't have to bear patiently the inconvenience of people. But look at how our thinking is. Who will we regard to be better? No. I just go to the masjid, I come back, I go sit in my home, I don't get involved in. But that's not the way. That's not the ideal. So we are supposed to be part of making a change. We have to be solution orientated. I always tell people, go throughout the history of Islam. Throughout the history, wherever Muslims went, they made such a positive impact in the places they stayed that the people of that land became Muslims by their positive interaction. I don't need to go. I'll just give you 3 examples. Muslims went to North Africa. The Berbers were the local indigenous people. Muslims converted them. And they reverted when they saw the akhlaq of Muslims. Up till to this day. There are many times people will revert because of a conquering army. But after the conquering army goes away, they go back to their place. Or they go back to their origin. Up till now, Berbers are Muslims. From the time when Sahaba came and reverted, they be reverted. Muslims went to Malaysia and Indonesia. They didn't conquer Indonesia and Malaysia. They went as traders. They were so beautiful in their akhlaq, in their interaction, in their conduct, that the whole Indonesia became Muslims. I read this yesterday. Someone sent me a clip. How many masjids? And they say the country with the greatest amount of masjids in the world is Indonesia. But that was, how did they become Muslim? By Muslim interaction, not by a conquering army. Look at West Africa, the same thing. So we in South Africa, we need to change our thought pattern. The thought pattern is wherever you are, make a positive impact. And you're not going to make a positive impact by staying in isolation. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to take part in this process. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. And how did Islam come to you? So be a person who takes forward the message of Islam. And I think that is something that I firmly advocate it. Many times people say by interaction, you put yourself up to, for example, threat of other people influencing you. So I said, are we so weak? Are we so weak that after 50 years or 30 years or 20 years of being a Muslim, by us interacting with someone, we are going to be influenced? What about us influencing others? Be confident, be assertive that no, I'm not going to be influenced. I'm going to be influencing others. So I think it's important that we change our mindset. This whole particular mindset with regard to, no, we don't want to take part in it. It is defeatist. It is very short-sighted, and is not been the way of the entire corpus of Islamic history.
Moulana, we can see the beautiful effects of being a good Muslim, being good to your brothers and sisters, whether they be non-Muslim or Muslim. And I think we should all make a concerted effort to try and become better people, not only in the Islamic community, but like we say, we live in a non-Muslim country or where majority of the citizens are non-Muslims. And I think by everyone being more involved in the community, showing their good character, showing their good side, showing that they're willing to fight for a better cause, we can influence and hopefully invite others towards Islam. And I think that's the goal that we're all looking forward to.
And of course, one of the questions that has been that how do we look at the political parties? Now, there's no political party that is going to be completely ideal. But we're all aware, even the present government, we are aware of the corruption, the lack of service delivery. They have thrown the ideal that people have when they came in 1994 out of the window. It is a sorry state with regard to what they have done. Yes, there are certain pros. They have taken a stance with regard to Palestine, which has won the admiration, not only of Muslims, but non-Muslims throughout the world. So how do you find, of course, someone will have to take a strategic decision when voting. What is something that I take to be ideal or value above all other values? Right? One of the values, for example, can be a person can take a view that, listen, my view is anyone who supports the genocide and who speaks in favor of what is happening after 30,000 people have been killed, innocent people have been killed, then I'm not going to support them irrespective of other things that they might have. Now, the one point that sometimes people say that if you are supporting a political party or political leader, it means that you are in favor of everything they do. It's far from it, very far from it. And this comes from no less an authority than the great Grand Mufti of India, Mufti Mahmud Sahib Rahmatullahi, who is buried in South Africa. And many South Africans have benefited from him. And he says that when you support a party for a particular reason, for a specific ideal, you don't have to agree with everything what they do. So you can support a party because they have taken a stance on Palestine. That doesn't mean you are supporting them in corruption. Doesn't mean you are supporting them in the corruption or the lack of service delivery. You are supporting them for that reason. Or you're supporting them perhaps because they have given you space to be able to practice upon your religion in an era and in a world where Islamophobia has become rampant, in an era where Muslims don't have the freedom that we have here comparatively in other countries. So if you support a candidate or political party for a particular reason, your vote is only for that reason. It doesn't mean that you support them in everything. And perhaps sometimes what we have to do is, all right, you're supporting them because of the reason. The other matters that you are not happy with or you are not satisfied with, then you involve yourself in community activism to rectify that. Now we talk about things and we talk about so many things and this is wrong, that is wrong. What have we done to correct it? What have you done as a solution? Are your youngsters coming through to become part and parcel of people in the community to become, in the CPF or as councillors? Have you done it? So don't talk about things when you have not been able to provide a solution. Let's become solution orientated. Unfortunately, today talk about a lot of idealism, but there is very short in solution. So let us become more solution orientated rather than problem orientated. And of course, it's nice to become problem orientated because you have to do nothing. You just sit and talk and this one is wrong, this one is wrong, that one is wrong, that one is wrong. But what have you done to do with regard to the right? And I think it's something that we need to start doing. So yes, you can support a party for a specific reason. Sometimes you can even support it that I want a powerful opposition to what is happening, so that they can keep in control the people who are in power, so that they don't get completely carried away their power. So what I'm saying is, when you take a specific goal, which you can reach, then you are voting for that specific goal. It doesn't mean that you are supporting the party in everything. But one thing I will say is, the one point that there is non-negotiable for the Muslim community is, we cannot support any party that has been soft on the genocide of our brothers and sisters in Palestine. That is a non-negotiable. So anyone with regard to any party who has been lenient and has been, soft on the genocide, we cannot give them our vote.
I think Moulana has cleared a lot of misconceptions with regard to the voting. Moulana, so political decisions often shape our communities, maybe the building of masajid, accessibility to madrasas. From your perspective, what are some crucial bills or issues both locally and internationally that Muslims should pay attention to?
I'll answer this not directly, but I'll give you a broad understanding. Many years ago, a very prominent alim came to our offices. His name was Moulana Ebrahim. He was a very, very talented, very great, astute scholar who knew what is happening in the world. He was someone that also reignited my passion for reading, because whenever he used to come, he used to lament that the younger people are not reading. And he used to say that there are such beautiful works. And whenever he heard about a beautiful kitab that has been published, he used to talk about it. Look at this book has been published, this book has been published. So when he came to our office, he said that a very great freedom fighter, someone who fought for the freedom of the Indo-Pak subcontinent, came to a district in India known as Surat. And I won't say everyone, but there are people who are in our community who come from that particular district, the Surat, Gujarat district. And he told them, he said, see, democracy works by you taking an active part in the decision-making process. So he says sometimes when you take part in that decision-making process, sometimes you will succeed, sometimes you will fail. But if you are not going to be on the table and your voice is not going to be heard and your voice is not going to be taken where the decision-making process is taking place, then don't blame anyone but yourselves. Now, if you understand that principle, that's how democracy works, that you have to be on the table for your voice to be heard. So for your voices to be heard, you have to be making an impact. So whether it be the Bella Bill, whether it be the divorce bill, the divorce bill was signed into law, right? For many, many years, our view was that go in there, try and make a change to a way that is as close as possible. Well, it didn't happen, whatever happened. Now we'll have to bear the consequences. Allah knows what's going to happen with the consequences. How it will pan out, Allah Ta'ala knows. But you have to be active. So you have to be active at local level for your community services. What has the Muslim community, for example, done in getting young people to become counselors? Right? So what are we doing with regard to it? I've seen recently now that there is a move where people are coming from our community and getting involved at council level. So you don't win all your battles, but at least you're there. It makes a difference. So people know who to speak to. They know who to phone. This man is our counselor. We have to phone him. But if you're not there, what's going to happen? Similarly, with regard to the bills that are in Parliament, you have to be there at the process from the very outset to be able to try and make it. Sometimes you might get it right. Sometimes you might even have to, for example, say, okay, we can't get the entire ideal. Let us work towards something that lessens the blow or becomes lesser in terms of its impact. So you need to get involved. If you don't become involved, then you can't blame anyone but yourself. And the community needs to understand that we need to become involved to be able to make a change. And in isolation, you can't change matters. You can talk a lot within your own circle of friends, but it won't show for nothing.
It's a nice point that Moulana touched on. I think effort is one of the most important things. At least we can say we tried. We couldn't get everything in our favor, obviously. Maybe our power is not enough. And at the end of the day, it's all in the will of Allah. But at least we can say at the end of the day, we tried. We put in some effort. We never just complained. We did something to try and change the outcome. Moulana, as Muslims, what are some recommended practices we should follow before, during and after casting our votes?
One thing that is very clear in our religion, our deen, is that we adopt means, but after adopting means, we don't put our trust in the means. So you have to adopt the means. Without adopting the means, you won't be able to get anything. Right? So I normally give this broad example that if someone comes and he makes, even if he can make dua at the time of tahajjud and he can cry in front of Allah Ta'ala, oh Allah, I've heard that when you get pious children, those pious children will make dua for you and they can become the means of your akhirat, right? And you make dua that, Ya Allah, I want pious children, but you don't get married. Where's Allah Ta'ala going to give you pious children? You have to get married for you get pious children. So first thing is we need to adopt the means. But after adopting the means, it has always been the way of the ulama, as-sa'yu minni wal-itmamu min Allah. We make the effort, but the completion and perfection of it comes from Almighty Allah. So both of these things go hand in hand. making the effort and then turning towards Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change the situation. That is how we find. So we find that our beloved Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, one day a person came and he had his camel, and when he had his camel, he said, Ya Rasulullah, should I tie my camel or should I just trust in Allah and leave my camel wherever it is, and Allah Ta'ala will protect it? And we all know the very famous hadith in Jami' al-Tirmidhi. Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, go and tie your camel and then put your trust in Allah Ta'ala. So with regard to democracy and with regard to the matter, are you just going to put going to vote? That doesn't absolve you of your responsibility. Voting is just one small step. You still have a great amount of responsibility towards making dua to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put an impact on your efforts and to make the effort. So nothing works without effort. Putting in effort, the greater the effort, the greater the help of Almighty Allah. In Urdu there is a saying, "Immate marg madad khuda." The courage and conviction of a human being brings the help of Allah. The help of Allah Ta'ala comes with a person's conviction and effort. If you look at our beloved Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there was no one who had greater reliance upon Almighty Allah. But there is not a battle, there is not an expedition, there is not a travel that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam undertook that he didn't have a plan, he didn't have a strategy, he didn't make effort. Every battle of his, he put people in specific places. In the battle of Uhud, he said, you stay on this mountain because it's a strategic mountain. Don't move from here. If you move from here, we are going to be in problems. In the battle of Badr, he put people in specific places. When he went to conquer Makkah, he told the people, we will do it in such a concealed manner, no one will know that we are going to conquer Makkah. The people of Makkah only came to know that the army of Muslims are there when they saw the fires burning outside the campsite of Muslims. Everything Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did, he did it with a strategy. He did it with an effort. And he did it with a plan. What is our plan? And that, unfortunately, many a times we have to reply in the negative. That is not the sunnah of Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
So Moulana mentioned earlier at the beginning that he hasn't or know of any students that have read the Seerah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Is there any advice or that Moulana can give to our youngsters to gain the love for the Sahaba, or even reading about the Sahaba or gaining knowledge about Sahaba? Because there is no doubt that the Sahaba and Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a perfect role model for us to adopt the same ways in our lifestyle.
Well, the difficult part that we have today is because of social media, our concentration span has become limited. So even our reading is confined to 140 characters on Twitter, for example, or what we get from social media. Reading requires a certain degree of isolation, certain degree of putting away all your temptations, putting away everything that can distract you, and then being able to do so. Now, that's one of the problems that we have even with regard to studies. So you have people who find it very difficult to study because they can't get away from the distraction. And I think one of the biggest point with regard to progress is you have to say no to be able to say yes. Let me explain that. Sometimes you have to say no to negativity to be able to say yes to positivity. I know a big example. So sometimes you just give a big example for people to understand. So when a child is taking the breast of the mother, and when it's time to wean off the breast of the mother, the child finds it very difficult. It cries so much, right? And the mothers and the family will put into process certain things to wean it off the breast milk. But it finds it very difficult. But until that child does not say no to breast milk, it cannot say yes to all the beautiful dishes it will have for the rest of its life. It won't be able to say yes to ekalwayas, right? It won't be able to say yes to chicken tikka or anything what you love. It has to say no to the breast milk to be able to say yes. And that is a very important thing. If you want to be, for example, productive, we have to say no to distractions to be able to say yes to productivity. So we have to learn the art of saying no to be able to say yes. Say no to negativity, no to distractions, to be able to say yes to studies, reading, productivity. Because there's no doubt whatsoever that distractions are taking us away from being productive the way we should be. And Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has laid great amount of effort and emphasis upon productivity. Be someone who is productive, doing something that is good for him in this world or in the hereafter.
Moulana, so even discipline plays a pivotal role in one's life, especially with reading Quran daily. Your salah should be done on time. For the men, going to the masjid. So discipline is definitely something a person should take control of. We would like to say Jazakallah khairan to Moulana Ebrahim Bham for sharing your valuable advice and gracing our school with your presence. We are deeply honored to have had you join us.
Jazakallah for the opportunity.
To our listeners, we trust this episode has also sparked inspiration to read and expand your knowledge. More importantly, we hope it has prompted reflection on the crucial decision of casting your vote on May 29th, 2024. Remember, your vote holds immense power and can shape the course of our nation and the world. As Abraham Lincoln once said, the ballot is stronger than the bullet, a truth demonstrated time and time again, particularly in the Palestinian conflict, where our courageous leaders have stood against oppression despite the outward negative consequences it may have.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube or follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. Be sure to hit the like button and share your thoughts on today's episode with us. If you have any suggestions for future content or if you wish to be a guest on our show, feel free to reach out on Instagram or via email. Your input is valuable to us. We would like to say a big jazakallah to our Amir, Moulana Aslam, and a big jazakallah to Moulana Muhammad Akoojee for coordinating this and assisting us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We could not have made this audio adventure possible without the incredible contribution of Moulana Aslam Raja, Appa Amira Hajjat, and the brilliant minds of the Qurtuba Islamic Academy podcast team. Remember to hit the subscribe button and follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. This has been a Qurtuba Islamic Academy production. Stay tuned for more.